The next tier up of SVS's popular PB-2000 Pro ported subwoofer is the PB-3000. There are obvious differences, but also plenty of similarities as well. Now, at first glance, the main differences you'll find between the PB-2000 Pro and PB-3000 are the driver size and amplifier power. The PB-3000 gains an inch over the PB-2000 Pro's 12-inch driver, coming in at 13 inches. Now, that's not exactly a massive difference, and so one shouldn't expect any massive performance differences between the two due to driver size. And that's honestly more than likely part of the reason SVS lists the frequency response as the same on both subwoofers. The larger driver size of the PB-3000 does mean that the box will obviously be slightly bigger, but that also means we see the ports increase slightly on the PB-3000 to 3.5 inches over the 3-inch ports on the PB-2000 Pro. So really, the biggest difference other than the woofer size and bigger box comes down to power. The PB-3000 beats out the PB-2000 Pro with 800 watts of RMS power. That's nearly 300 watts more than what the PB-2000 Pro offers. And in terms of peak power, the PB-3000 has 2,500 watts of power to draw from in comparison to the PB-2000 Pro's 1,500 watts. Now, this means that when needed, the PB-3000 has a lot more power to draw from when bass needs to hit loud and hard in short bursts. And that's compounded even more if you consider adding a second PB-3000 to the mix. So what does that actually mean in terms of real-world performance for the average user? Well, basically, if you find that your subwoofer seems to be running out of steam when playing back music, movies, or games, and the bass is not filling your room like you want it to or expect it to, then more than likely you need more power. And that extra power on the PB-3000 here helps a lot to ensure that it won't run out of steam as soon as the PB-2000 Pro will. Now, it can still run out of juice if you're listening to something like Blade Runner 2049 at reference level, which is really freaking loud, by the way, and especially if you only have one subwoofer, but it will do so less often than the PB-2000 Pro will. Now, not to get too deep into the woods here, although it may already be too late for that, but stick with me, trust me. If you're someone who calibrates to a reference level of, say, 75 decibels. That means that your subwoofer needs to hit peaks of around 115 decibels, which is 40 decibels louder than your calibrated reference volume. Depending on the movie and how it was mixed, those maximum bass peaks will always be 40 decibels louder than your volume level, and your subwoofer will attempt to hit it if it can. Now, a good example of this would be something like a huge explosion or a really loud shotgun blast like in John Wick Chapter 3. So to try to put things into perspective and drive things home, if your listening volume is, say, 60 decibels, your subwoofer would need to hit peaks around 100 decibels if it can. That can be really difficult for subwoofers as amplifier power goes down, so it makes sense that the PB-3000 here would have an easier time hitting or at least getting close to that level than the PB-2000 Pro when we're talking about those really high peak volumes. That's why peak wattage ratings can be important. In terms of overall sound quality, there is a difference, but I think it's going to be hard for a lot of people to discern the difference between the two. But what I can say is this: I typically run with 4 subwoofers total in my home theater, 2 in the front and 2 near field subwoofers right behind my seats. During my testing and review process for the PB-3000s, I only had 2 running as my front 2, no other subwoofers in the mix because that wouldn't be fair. Now, in all honesty, it was much closer to running with 4 subwoofers than if I had just used the 2 PB-2000 Pros. The PB-3000s really made me feel that bass. So while on paper, the PB-3000s have about the same frequency response of the PB-2000 Pros, I noticed things seem to just hit harder on the PB-3000s. Now, I'm an enthusiast here and I'm no expert, but I'm thinking this comes down to the extra power the PB-3000 can draw from. Both the PB-3000s and the PB-2000 Pros were placed in the exact same 2 spots in the room and then time aligned and calibrated with the same EQ curve. And to my ears, the PB-3000 simply win out every single time. But are the differences enough to make you upgrade your PB-2000 Pros to the PB-3000s? Well, I can't really answer that for you. It just depends on your needs. Now, they are better and I can recommend them over the PB-2000 Pros, but it really does come down to your needs, your room, and your power requirements. That's an important one. If you find that the PB-2000 Pros aren't really filling or pressurizing your room like you want or expect, then the PB-3000s might fit that bill depending on the size of your room. Now, if aesthetics are important to you, then I really do have to give the nod to the PB-3000s for the sole reason of including a metal grill instead of a fabric one. Now, I spoke about this in my unboxing video as well, and there's just something about the metal grill that really does make the PB-3000 feel more premium than the PB-2000 Pro. Now, I saved this part for late in the video because it obviously does not impact performance at all, but it is something that some people may find important. It's also worth mentioning that both the PB-2000 Pro and PB-3000 can be run in sealed mode, with the PB-3000 including the port plugs in the box, while they're available by request for free with the PB-2000 Pros. I unfortunately didn't have time to do much comparing in this mode, as I think those who are really interested in sealed subs would be looking at either the SB-2000 Pro or the SB-3000. But it is a really nice feature in addition for those that want or expect flexibility from their subwoofer. So overall, it's not a landslide win for the PB-3000 over the PB-2000 Pro, but it is a better subwoofer. I still give the price to performance win to the PB-2000 Pro, and it's still my go-to choice if you have a smallish size room, but for larger spaces or bass heads like myself, if I'm being honest, the PB-3000 is the one I'd go with. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, feel free to give it a thumbs up or a like or whatever you want to call it. Do you feel like weighing in on the differences or similarities between these two subwoofers yourself? Well, leave a comment down below. And hey, while you're here, be sure to check out my review for the PB-3000 here. Or is it here? It's one of the two. It's going to be right here. So check it out, and thank you so much for watching.